Well, welcome back to a show I watched. It's a loose collection of series where I talk about things that I've watched and kind of give my first impressions. This is a very, very new impression given that I just finished this show 2 minutes ago. That being School Spirits Season 1. Apparently, it has been renewed for a second season. Thank God. But as of now, only the one season available. That's what I watched. That's what I'm going to talk about, as opposed to The Good Place where I just binged all of it at once. This is just going to be me talking about season 1. When season 2 comes out, I will do that because I just need to talk about this show. Going into it, I was very much not expecting to dislike it, but I was expecting it to be somewhere around where Lockwood and Co. sat, of a very, not campy, but a show that lived on its atmosphere, right? Because, that sometimes a show like that can be good, especially it's October, it's that time of the year, things can just be good based off of their aesthetic. This is not one of those shows. School Spirits, and before I really get into things, I do want to say I will be spoiling things because I just have so much I want to talk about with this show. But if just off the bat, my recommendation, absolutely. Love the show, great drama, great mystery, very fun, very engaging. I binged the whole thing basically since I recorded my last video, like last night, so yeah. But yeah, I highly recommend. I'm gonna get into it now. From now on, this isn't really structured, but there may not be spoilers. Just watch with caution, and by that I mean don't watch it. Go watch the show. There you go. Yeah, I really enjoyed this show. Very fun. I found the mystery very engaging. I will say I did manage to call a lot of the plot twists, but by that I mean I like and immediate spoiler stuff. But Simon makes a comment fairly early on in the show. I forget where, but first half of the show, to Maddie after she's died of, at least you came back as a ghost, not as a zombie. That would be way worse. And basically from when he said that, and then they introduced this mysterious figure who is running around, they hid her face, they hid their face, I immediately went, oh, okay, so that's probably, if I had to guess, that has to be Maddie's body. Because they haven't found her yet. They have no idea what happened to her. But so far, nothing. And that character showed up, and I was like, oh, is that Maddie's body? That could be interesting, actually. I want to see that would... And turns out that's what they did. And also, based on the line about... There is a few things... Dawn making a comment about hypnosis being a bad idea because it lets something, it leaves the door open. Implied to me like, oh, so that means possessions might be a thing that can happen in this canon, and then they pointed out that when Janet disappeared, there was no lights. And so from there, I kind of pieced it together of, oh, so they haven't found Maddie's body. Janet's disappearance was incredibly suspect. It's implied by, granted, a pretty kooky character that possessions can happen, so... Which ended up being the case. Which, honestly, I really like as a twist. I'm really interested to see what they're going to do about that now that she's back on the bus, because, all things considered, she's not dead. She could come back, and that's something that I would really enjoy seeing. but all the ghost characters were very fun. The teacher, he was acted very well. He had this very good, intimidating presence when he needed to be. He felt he came off as very wise when he needed to be. Great performance. I liked Rhonda. She was very crass. I love those kinds of characters. Taught me a lot of great new swear words. Just love that shit. Wally. I think Wally's my favorite. He's so dumb, and I love him. He's great. Like, they even call out, like, yeah, he's basically a golden retriever. And I thought it was funny that he always gets really jealous whenever Simon gets brought up. Charlie is great. I really liked how they handled him. And they literally made an unburyable gay. So I think that's like a nice little thing they did. But all the ghost characters are great. Ooh, and Mina and Dawn were really great. Dawn had, I think her character really came together over the course of the story. She starts as this kind of like as I've said, kooky kind of background character where everyone is like, oh, she has a screw loose. And then over the course of the series, she kind of gets explored in a little more depth. She's just really nice, really helpful, a little bit weird. She was fun. And Mina, she's this really crazy, angry girl who lives in the rafters lives in the rafters of the theater. And as someone who has worked in like the lighting decks of a theater before, it is pretty damn accurate. And I just thought she was a very fun character. I wish she had shown up more. The actress who played her pulled off her whole idea really well. I would really like to see more of her in season 2 if she comes back. I also want to see if there's something to do with the school being maybe cursed in some way. I think that would be an interesting thing they could maybe touch on. Because they make a comment about how they changed the mascot of the school from devils to bandits because of the people were getting a little bit concerned about like the amount of kids who were dying for obvious reasons. The first that we know of being the teacher, Mr. Martin, and Janet. And towards the end, in the last episode, we realize Mr. Martin has been like cataloging them and tracking them and treating them as a science experiment, which I also think is a very interesting direction to take his character, because he's a chemistry teacher, he's a scientist. And he died in the 60s, which, if I remember correctly, at least in psychology, there at the time was a big, or maybe it was a few decades before, this idea of trying to measure the supernatural. And I think it's very interesting that they took a science teacher and then put him in this very supernatural situation, and his instinct, the thing that puts him at odds with the other characters, at least secretly, is that he's studying them. And I just think that's a really interesting way for them to take that. I really want to see what happens with Janet in Maddie's body, because Janet is a character who we've seen for maybe 5, not even 5. We've heard her speak for a total of maybe a minute. And so she has gotten on a bus to God knows where. So I think they really... So in order for her to be a focus of later seasons, they'd need to bring her back in somehow, or kind of divorce the narrative from our characters to her. And I think there's that interesting thing of what's going to how does Maddie feel about her body being exposed to God knows what without her knowledge. I think that's going to be a fun thing to explore. Though I will say, I was very much expecting Simon to die by the end. because I did not know that they were making a season 2. I thought that season 1 was just going to be the end of it. And it wasn't until maybe the last half of the episode where I realized, like, oh, there's a bit too much to wrap up here, because that whole thing with the, like, I guess theoretically the person that the side character, like the living side characters are chasing, could be the murderer, but how would they like resolve that? But I was expecting, okay, Simon dies, him and Maddie are together now after like confessing, and it's gonna be cute, it'll be nice, because his whole thing is he doesn't want to leave her. Though obviously now that we kind of have another version of that where Maddie gets her body back, which could happen. It would just kind of depend on them drawing Janet back to the school, which I think it could happen. I don't think it's impossible. But also I'm not sure how to feel about the arc with Xavier and Claire and Nicole. The three of them kind of have this unifying fact of they've all fucked over Maddie in some way. Xavier was her boyfriend. He cheated on her with Claire, who used to be her friend and then cheated on, slept with her boyfriend before she died. And Nicole attempted to blackmail their teacher for money, but the teacher thought it was Maddie, which they believe could have gotten her killed. And the whole reason she did that was so that she could be with her, Maddie and Simon at college, because she can't afford it. And we kind of, one of the last things we find out is that now Maddie can't, when she died, Maddie couldn't afford it either, because her mom had blown all the money on, a cabin somewhere. So I think those have a very fun dynamic where over the course of the show, Simon goes from like, oh, Xavier did it, clearly. Xavier didn't do it. Claire did it, clearly. Oh, well, Claire didn't do it. Nicole did it. Oh, no, she didn't. And those three kind of end up being part of the main group. And it's I always like when shows can take characters that you'd think would be despicable, awful people and turn them into actually very interesting characters. The other one I can think of is to a different extent to The Deep from The Boys, where he is kind of objectively a terrible, horrible person when the series starts, and then over the course of the show he tries to improve, but he doesn't really. He's still just as manipulative and gross, but to where the series is now. But it's just that everyone around him gets so much worse, where like he's just like, a normal bad person, whereas like everyone around him is like psychotic and evil. But I'm getting off topic. School Spirits, honestly, there's not much I can complain about with the series other than like, standard teen show stuff. The actors are a bit old. Peyton List is 25, depicting a senior in high school. Granted, she looks good. It's not really an issue of, oh, she looks too old, but like it's a little obvious, but that's also because now that I definitely recognized her from somewhere, and I think it was from Jessie. I think that's where I remember her from, and that was a little bit distracting, but that's just my personal thing. I also kept thinking that like the actor who played the teacher was from something else, but I still don't know where, per se. I wanted to say he was one of the guys from Mighty Med, but that doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I'll have to look into that. But Yeah, there's really not all that much I can complain about with the show. I thought everything was pretty good. Uh, I'm pretty sure it takes place somewhere in Louisiana. I want to say that that's a thing that they said because I remember taking note of it. Uh, but at the same time, the topography of the area really didn't match very well. But like that's just a thing that I've come to accept about things that take place in Louisiana is no one ever gets it right because terrain in Louisiana is kind of completely flat. Like there's just nothing there. Uh, I live there. I can say that. Very flat place makes hiking suck, but yeah. There's also just a lot of funny jokes in the show. I really liked how there's just the band kids who are there like twice, and like they just never show up again. They're just presumably always there playing their music 24/7 and never stop, and like presumably they have to know they're dead, like otherwise why would anyone be letting them just do that? But they're just there. uh there are these two other ghosts. It's this alt girl and this guy in like a gray not tracksuit, like almost like a jumpsuit. I think he might be some kind of janitor, maybe. Who I think they get like one line each throughout the show. And I'm hoping future seasons explore them because I was expecting them to be like, background, like more secondary characters, like Dawn ended up being and Mina, but they're not, which is a little bit weird because they're in all of Mr. Martin's meetings. They're always there. It's just like the four or so main ghost characters, Maddie, Wally's, Charlie, and Rhonda, and then these two unnamed characters with like practically zero speaking lines. And I was like, man, I wish we could have seen from them more. Aside from that, there's also this other thing that I really liked about the show that I didn't notice the first time, or the first time it happened, but whenever the show does flashbacks, because a large point, like a large part of the narrative of the show is Maddie trying to figure out what happened to her because she doesn't remember, which is presumably something to do with Janet taking over her body. She didn't die like the others did. So she doesn't remember the moments leading up to her becoming a ghost. So there are large chunks of the narrative that are dedicated to her regaining her memories. Hell, it's an entire episode's premise is them trying to to jog her memories. And the way they represent something being in a flashback is they change the aspect ratio. I think it's like 3:4 during cutscenes. I don't know the actual terminology. I'm not an actual like critic or filmmaker. Like that's kind of the whole premise of this. I have no idea what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the shit I've seen. Where they kind of shrink the aspect ratio during flashbacks, so that's this kind of like squared off scene or aspect ratio where there's like these big black bars to either side, and that's to denote the flashbacks. And I think that was a really interesting visual effect. It's a very good visual storytelling, or a very good visual indicator, so that you can go, okay, this is a flashback now. We're seeing things that happened in the past. And then when it goes back to the present, they go back to widescreen. And there's a lot of really nice transitions with that, where it will basically the flashback will end, and then basically another character will okay, a better way to explain this would be with an example. The first time I noticed it, there's a flashback to Matt that ends with Maddie opening. She's in a hallway at school. She opens the doors. She walks to the side. And then go back to the present. That keeps the shot on that hallway, on those doors, no cut. Xavier comes in through those doors after Maddie's off screen. And I thought, like, wow, that's actually really cool. And it sticks with that throughout the whole thing. It's this very, very good way of it's a very smooth transition, and I think they did it really well. Also, some other things I think just rapid fire real quick, because just to wrap this up, they don't. There are some things that they don't necessarily put a ton of focus on. When characters receive texts, there's not like this big blown up text bubble that tells you what like is being said in the text. And like, yeah, that does help for some shows to give you a good indication of what's being sent in the message, but it's not really it would be out of place in the show just because that doesn't happen frequently enough. A lot of things are kept I forget the term, diegetic, I think. Things look as they are in the world. Wally's using a microfiche machine to look at old newspapers, and they see Janet's name on the paper, and this is like a big revelation. They don't zoom into it and underline it or whatever. It's just there, and I think that is, and they draw your attention to it because Wally's pointing to it, his finger's under the name, but there's no like intense zoom in of Janet's name. That's the only thing on screen, like I've seen in other shows. Or the other thing that I wanted to bring up like that, things happen in background dialogue. There's when Claire wants to bring Xavier to the homecoming dance, her friends are like, didn't he murder his girlfriend? And Claire's like, first of all, no. Second, to one of her like friends who's like the same three girls, and they're just like following her around, she tells one of them like, hey, hasn't your boyfriend been wearing the same shoes since like 7th grade? And it cuts to like, you know, the scene moves on, but then in the background you can hear her, a girl going, he owns other shoes, you know. And I just thought that was like really funny. And another really great use of that is Wally, Charlie, and Rhonda figure out for the first time that Maddie can talk to someone who's alive. That's the first time any of them have ever. Well, no, Charlie knew. Wally Charlie had Maddie hide it from people because this is unprecedented. They didn't want people to know. And Wally and Rhonda find out, and they're like absolutely pissed. And Rhonda's freaking out because like Maddie can talk to the living. What the fuck? And Rhonda's freaking out, and Wally is like, calm down, okay. And Rhonda's like, what, are you not pissed? And Wally says, of course I'm pissed. And then, you know, Simon walks away, and I believe Maddie tries to follow him, and you can hear in the background, like, you can hear them shouting at each other, and it's not really focused on, but you can still hear Rhonda going, are you not pissed off because it's your crush or whatever? And this isn't really focused on, but then that becomes like a later episode plot of Wally having a crush on Maddie. And I like that that's how they revealed that information. It's not this big dramatic revelation. It's just a background element to a more important scene. And I really like the way they handled that. But yeah, overall, just a show that I very much enjoyed. I will absolutely watch season 2 when it comes out. No clue when that's going to be, but I'm going to see it. I think anyone should watch it. I think it's a very good show. It's not really a horror show at all. It's more of just a mystery drama. Granted, if you've watched by this point, I've already spoiled, you know, a lot of things, but I do still think that like a lot of the plots in the show still warrant watching, because it's just a very well put together show. But for now, that is all I have to say on it until season 2, which it's only a matter of time, apparently. So I will see you next time I watch something.